everyone, I'm Ebony Love of LoveBug Studios, and today in the video I'm going to talk to you about the Isosceles triangle dies for the Go and the Studio. I'd like to introduce you to Cleopatra. Cleopatra is my Big Shot Pro by Cizzix. Because we're using Studio and Go dies, I thought I would demonstrate the use of them on the Cizzix Big Shot Pro, since this machine is compatible with both Studio and Go dies, as long as you have the right adapters available. Let's get started. First up, let's talk about the Go Isosceles triangle die. This is the 5x6 Isosceles triangle die. We can take a look at it here on the screen. And the die for the Go has 2 Isosceles triangle dies, while the Studio version has 3. So let's take a look at the Studio version. So you can see the Studio version has 3 Isosceles triangle dies on the board. These 2 dies are identical, so for those of you who are either crafting with the Studio, the Go, or the Big Shot Pro, either one of these dies will work. If you're planning to use the Go die on your Big Shot Pro or the Go die on your Studio, you will need the appropriate adapter. And my favorite adapter to use for this is actually sold by AccuQuilt. This is the Go die adapter for the Studio. This is the smaller version, the 10x12 version, and this is what you need to put in your tray when you are die cutting, either with the Big Shot Pro or with the Studio. Because of the size of these dies, neither one of them will fit on the Go Baby or the Cizzix Big Shot. So you can feel free to use the Go Isosceles triangle die on the Go or the Studio version on the Studio. You cannot interchange these dies. I'm going to show you, some people don't really know the difference between a Go and a Studio die, so I'm going to just show you that these 2 dies have different thicknesses. So hopefully you can see that here, that there's about a ½ inch difference between the Studio die and the Go die. So that's why the dies are not cross-compatible on the Go. Before we start cutting, I do want to talk a little bit about the markings that appear on the dies themselves. I swear by my silver permanent marker. You can use anything to mark your die that is going to be permanent and not transfer color to your fabric. I love the silver markers because they show up beautifully on the foam. Okay, so on this die, I want to talk a little bit about what I have marked here. First of all, I have outlined the shape of the blades, and that just helps me to know where the dies or where the blades are actually positioned. It also shows up great in the video so that those of you who are watching can see the blades. When I'm outlining a die, and this one's already done and also the Studio version is already done, but when I'm outlining the blades, I'm actually taking the marker and I'm shoving it into that position where the blade is and just dragging the marker along that position. I do keep a couple of silver markers handy because this outlining or marking the dies, it does tend to use up the markers pretty quickly. Once I've outlined the shapes on the die, then I want to draw what are called registration lines. And for this particular die, I have outlined a line that is parallel with the top blade. So I've already drawn this on here, so hopefully you can see that I've already drawn this on here. And how I got this line is I basically took my ruler and I aligned the 1/4 inch mark. And it's probably a little bit hard to see because there's so many numbers on my ruler, but I aligned the 1/4 inch mark on the ruler with the blade. And once you have outlined that the blade, you will be able to see that so clearly underneath your ruler. So I just line up the 1/4 inch mark of my ruler with the blade and I draw a straight line across. Once I have that line, it's very easy for me to then turn the ruler and align the 1/4 inch line with the outside edge of the blade, but I want a straight line going across the previous line that I drew, and that's how I got the perpendicular line. Sometimes when you have dies that have angled shapes, it is a little bit difficult to figure out how to draw the lines, but if you just find a straight edge, no matter how small that straight edge is, that's going to help you to align to draw your registration lines. Once I have those lines, then I'm able to measure the amount of fabric that would be needed to cover the shape. And I've done this previously on the Go die. To cut both of these shapes, I would be cutting a piece of fabric to 6.5 inches tall by 8.5 inches wide. So that is the exact amount of fabric that's going to cover this shape. But we'll talk about these angled edges in a second. I've done the same thing on the Studio die. So if you can take a look at that here, I have identified that it takes a 6.5 inch tall strip by 10.5 inch wide to cover the shape. So I use those measurements just to give me an idea of what fabric I need to cover the shapes. Other lines that will probably be useful to you that I haven't marked on this die because I want to be able to show this to you in the video is marking half triangles. The reason I might want to do this is because if I'm working on a quilt and I want the outside edges to be straight, I have a couple of choices. I can either just let the excess hang off the edge, or I can attach a half triangle to the end to make sure that it is square. So that would be sort of this shape in here, but there are no blades to draw or to actually cut that. So what I want to do is actually draw in a line that's halfway. However, a half triangle is not just drawing straight from point to the center. You actually want to offset that by 1/4 inch because that is your seam allowance. So I'm going to actually draw a line that is 1/4 inch away from the points. So I'm aligning, and I'll show you this in a second, but I'm aligning the straight edges of the lines that I marked, and I'm putting my 1/4 inch mark that's on my ruler at the point of the triangle and just making sure that I have a straight line down here. And what I'm going to do is actually, I'm not going to draw in a full line. I'm actually going to just dash this line, and that's going to be my half triangle. And so that's an alignment line that I can use to make half triangles. I can do that again on the other side. I know it looks a little bit weird because it is it's off center, but if I want to make a half triangle, I'm going to need that extra seam allowance there. Okay? I might also want to just measure that distance so that I know that the amount of fabric that I need to create that is going to be 3¼ inches. So that's another piece of information that I can mark on this die. So that's 6.5 by 3 1/4 is the half triangle. And those are just good rough measurements to know. Again, I'm writing directly on the die with that information. So that's another piece of information that's useful on your die. Another thing that I've done on the studio die is I've measured out what's the size of fabric to cover 1 triangle, 2 triangles, or all 3 triangles. And that's something that you may also want to do on the Go die as well. So to do 1 full triangle, I need a piece of fabric that's 5 1/2 inches wide. And if I want to do 2 triangles, that's 8 inches wide, and then all 3 of them is the 10 1/2 inches wide. So all of these things I mark on the die. And another piece of information that you'll see me do on this die and on many others is that if I'm working from strips, I will actually calculate what the yield is for a strip of 42-inch wide fabric. And so I've marked up here in the corner that if I cut a strip that's 6 1/2 inches wide by the width of fabric, I'm going to get 15 triangles from that width of fabric. And that is, if you do that as you are cutting with your dies, you're going to pretty soon have a library of dies that you can go to and sort of be able to calculate the fabric that you need for your quilts.